Well, hello everybody, welcome to a Level Up. Today we'll be talking about how to improve your card game. Now, when I say card game, this includes games like such as, of course, Magic the Gathering, living card games like Android Netrunner, Call of Cthulhu, the card game, or even games like Dominion, and any of the deck building aspect, Few Acres of Snow. Because the math and everything is all actually very transferable. So, I basically started in 1995 with most people at my age with Magic the Gathering's Ice Age set. And you never really leave Magic the Gathering. I still play it once in a while, a bit, I must admit, rarely. But I play a lot of the other card games now too, such as Android and Call of Cthulhu. And a Few Acres of Snow especially also. And through these 20 years, I have learned some things. I learned through experience and reading and watching videos and all, a lot of tips. And rather than, you yourself having to experience 20 years of that, I'm going to just give you tips now so that it'll save you the time, and I hope it does help you. So let's get into resource. Really, I would say that a very good way of starting out, all right, is to use, especially for the for the LCGs, the living card games, cardsdb.com, because it was made by fans and it is still very much supported by the fans. It has been bought up by Fantasy Flight, which actually produces a lot of the more famous living card games such as Android, Warhammer Fantasy, Invasion, and such. Alright, but because they list all the cards and everything, you can play test a lot of the decks. There is no play by play, but you can press like refresh, and they'll give you a random hand for your deck. That you can see how everything works out. They have all the charts and the math in the game. Alright, it's a free resource. It's just a sign up, and I think this is the best tip I can give right now for especially the LCGs. I'm sure there's some for Magic the Gathering and all, although I've not gone into the Magic the Gathering. But when I play and make my decks for living card games, especially on Fantasy Flight, I always use CardsDB. Now, to get to the more physical tips, let's get into that. Now, the first thing to take note is, of course, the math of the game. The math of the game is, for so many games, it's hard to really give a exact science. For like example, Magic the Gathering is 60 cards. For Warhammer Invasion, it's 50 cards. For Android Netrunner, it depends on the card and how corporation and the runner you're using. It can be 45 to 50 cards. Alright, but the thing you want to do is, depending on the deck you play, you want to make sure you mitigate luck. Alright, and what do I mean by that? In any card game, it's unavoidable. There is that luck factor of something such as top decking happen. Top decking meaning that you draw the top card of your deck when you need to draw it, and it's the perfect card you need to win the game. You can't deny, sometimes card games just happens. Even though you might be more skillful, your opponent draws exactly what he needs to beat you. Now, the thing to prevent that, and also to help yourself get a good top deck, is that you kind of set your deck, meaning you don't cheat, but you mitigate that luck factor by putting in number of cards to the legal limit, where you can, percentage wise, you're mitigating it, because every few cards you're supposed to draw what you need. In fact, you set your deck really well, you should be drawing something you need every turn. Alright, so that's what I mean by the math of the game. Example, if you're really playing a weenie deck, for example, where weenie deck meaning a lot of small creatures, you don't need that much mana, because basically they cost really cheap. And on top of that, if you have creatures that double as mana, such as some Magic the Gathering creatures where you tap them, they give you mana. Alright, you can even substitute those creatures. Alright, so again, it's all in the math of it. Use math to mitigate luck. That's the first and most important rule. The second thing is actually if you're just starting out, a good tip is always to use the recommended amount of cards in a deck. Because why? Well, because it's been play tested, and that's obviously why games like Magic the Gathering, Android Netrunner especially proves that these are the amount of cards in the deck that are probably the best play tested, and this is to give the most fair. Between deck versus deck, this is the most fair amount of cards that should help you to basically even out your win rates. Meaning, at least through the starting experience, if you play with that play tested number of cards, you can try to find out what's wrong with your deck, rather than is it actually the number of cards? Is it rather than 100 fumble, is it because I added 5 more cards that the math was thrown off and all of that? So if you're starting out, I will always recommend building your deck with the limit given to you through the basically the rulebook of the game. And to give even a deeper example, it also depends on what kind of deck you're playing, right? Now, if you're playing like a spell deck or a fireball deck from the red faction in Magic the Gathering, if you're playing fireballs and there's 20 life to beat your enemy, alright, if you have exactly fireball that deal exactly 20 damage in your deck, of course the math doesn't work out, because that will mean that you have to draw perfectly all your fireball cards before you can even win the game, alright? And so you see, again, it's all that kind of math. You have to do it depends on what kind of deck you're playing and everything, but math is very important in the game, and it's all actually, you can just use simple math, Example, if you're doing the fireball one, you need at least a base 20. Alright, then on top of that, then you can use other stuff that maybe increases that damage or builds upon that. Now the second tip in building your decks and all, and even like for Dominion and all, is no card in your deck should be useless. There should be no padding, basically. Every card should serve a purpose. To give a story on this, I saw someone play a One-Man Invasion deck, and he made an Orc deck where all the creatures and everything were big bulky creatures, and the entire deck he only had 2 goblins. Alright, and when I asked him why did he put the 2 goblins there, he said he just needed them to reach the limit in a way. And I was asking, why didn't you put something else, or either that or put more smaller creatures so that you have more smaller creatures at the start before you got your big creatures out. And he said he wanted to keep to the big creatures, but again, like I said, those 2 cards could easily be something else that gives him cash to put out big creatures faster and such. Alright, so that's another beginner mistake, where you're just adding cards because you need to reach a limit, or you feel that they are cool, basically, but they do nothing for the deck. Okay, so that's a very important tip, is that every card should be useful in their own way. There should be a cohesive combo in a way for the deck. And on top of that, like to follow on the example that I just gave, you don't want to have too many high cost creatures or spells or creatures or whatever in your deck. Now, because here's the thing, most cards in a game the cool ones are always very high cost and everything, and it looks cool, but when you play with too many high cost things, with Magic the Gathering, for example, you become something called mana starve, meaning you don't have enough mana to cast it because it costs so much, and even when you do cast it, you're only doing that amount of damage before you have to rebuild all your resources to go and cast it out again. Alright? Because there's usually a cost in playing these cards, even like for One-Man Invasion and all, and Android Netrunner, where you spend the credits and then you now need to collect these credits all over again. Alright, so it might look cool, but do remember that, again, use the math and always have a flow in that deck, whereby yes, there is big spells and creatures and all, but there must be a cohesive build up to it. There's because basically you don't want to die before you even get to use these cool things. The third tip is basically timing. Timing is when you already started the game, usually you get your hand of cards. Just because you have a fireball spell, for example, doesn't mean you have to use it. Example, if you're playing a deck that has a healing ability, like a white deck and all, alright, even if you can't think about why, or the long-term plan, if you cast out that first turn, let's say the rest of your hand is all, you're already mulligan already, and you have all enchantments and a fireball spell. You cast out the fireball spell, it causes 6 damage to him, but then basically from then you're drawing cards from the top of your deck, hoping to get even another fireball card or a creature to continue dealing damage to him. You won't kill him, and as a white deck he probably has healing ability, so by the time you start to deal damage again, more than likely he's already healed some of the ability, or he already got on his table or creatures to help him to deal damage to you. So that fireball spell at the start, it could have been used much better, maybe to kill a creature that could have been very devastating, or to keep in your hand to build up to a situation where you can so-called kill him in 1 or 2 spots. Basically, just because you have a card in hand, don't just use it for the sake of using it. Use it by building to a theme. For example, in Hearthstone, the game that Blizzard made, which is a great way to introduce people to card games, is free. Alright, when you play a priest deck, that's a very common one where you use Inner Fire and Divine Spirit, whereby you basically have a creature out there, alright, and when the opportunity strikes, what you do is you double the health of that creature, and then match it, the damage it does with its health, and you do that death blow, or either you set up that death blow, alright. Now, here's the thing, with the math in the game, it's only 30 cards in Hearthstone, more than likely you're only going to get this chance one time, because you're not probably going to draw all, even you put the maximum amount, 2 cards and 2 cards of Divine Spirit and Inner Fire, meaning that if you had used Inner Fire already one time, that combo is basically out of the game for you before you either die or you happen to win by some other means. So timing is very important. When to hold back that card, when to hold back even an attack. It doesn't mean just because you can attack, you should attack, you know. Alright, sometimes you might not want to attack. For example, if someone maybe has an instant spell that says when someone attacks, knowing an opponent's deck and all, it's that simple thing. It's always take your time, think through your opponent and your deck, and when's a good time to strike. And the last thing, of course, is have fun with theme. And this is actually, for me, my biggest problem with my deck building. I basically love theme more than winning. And so what happens is, whenever I play like Android Netrunner, I will play usually mono decks. I'll play like House Baroid with neutral cards and that's it. Even though the smart thing to increase my win rate would be to include Jinteki cards. I might do that in the future, but I've always been the type that I like the strong theme in the deck, you know. But of course, to do that, I will have to play a lot more, alright? Because once you include other different kind of cards, the math also changes. Different decks already have a certain kind of personality, and when you include other kind of decks in it, it affects it. So again, that's a choice for you, the theme, or what kind of theme you want to play. The most important thing is basic enjoyment, which is what I go for. So, in conclusion, I hope this helps you. I hope that be it Dominion or LCGs or CCGs, all the math and the tips on holding back, when to play your cards, timing and all, and using cards DB, resources that are free to use to help you form your decks and all, rather than, you know, the good thing about card DB is basically you have every card, then you can slowly look through all the cards, you know, and rather than having to sift through each card by card, and if you need a card, you can just type into a search bar. So all these resources, I hope, does help you improve your game and enjoy more of these card games. So thank you very much. Till next word.